Why do airplanes have a hole in the tail? A passenger looks out through the terminal glass while a jet sits at the gate, calm and heavy, almost asleep. The big engines are quiet. The fan blades under the wings are still. Nothing seems to be running. Yet inside the cabin, lights shine above the seats. Cool air slips from the vents, cockpit screens glow, and hidden computers quietly check themselves. Then, near the very back of the airplane, there is that small, dark opening in the tail. It can look like a hole punched into the metal for no clear reason. It is not damage, it is the exhaust path for a hidden machine that helps bring the aircraft to life before the main engines ever start turning. The hole people notice at the rear of many airliners is usually tied to the auxiliary power unit, better known as the APU. It is a small turbine engine, often buried inside the tail cone, behind the cabin, behind the cargo holds, far from the passengers settling into their seats. It is not meant to push the airplane through the sky. It is not a secret backup jet engine for extra speed. Its role is less obvious, but far more useful on the ground. It lets the airplane make its own power when the main engines are shut down. That matters more than it sounds. Picture an older aircraft parked on a cold ramp, long before modern airports were filled with jet bridges, fixed power hookups, and preconditioned air hoses. Even while sitting still, an airplane needed electricity for lights, radios, cockpit instruments, pumps, and basic systems. Larger turbine aircraft also needed pressurized air to help start their main engines. Smaller piston aircraft could get by with batteries, mechanical starters, or even hand starting in earlier eras. Ground crews could bring power carts, air carts, cables, hoses, and service vehicles. In that world, the airplane often depended on whatever equipment the airport could provide. That arrangement made sense when aircraft were smaller, routes were shorter, and operations moved at a slower pace. As commercial aviation expanded, the ramp turned into a tightly organized workplace, full of movement. Fuel trucks rolled in. Baggage carts rattled across concrete. Catering lifts rose toward open service doors. Mechanics moved around panels and wheels. Ground power units sat nearby, humming loudly beside the fuselage. Airlines wanted quicker turnarounds. Pilots needed reliable systems before departure. And not every airport, especially a smaller or remote one, had the same equipment waiting at every stand. For a large airplane, being able to power itself was not just a nice feature, it gave the aircraft independence. The development of auxiliary power came from one practical fact of aviation. An airplane spends a surprising amount of its life on the ground. Before takeoff, it is not just a vehicle. It is a sealed workspace full of people, wiring, ducts, screens,
the valves on the secondary line
lights,
are looking good.
Pumps,
Copy that.
cooling
We are ready
systems,
to check the aircon
and
systems.
air conditioning needs. After landing, it becomes that busy workspace all over again. The main engines are capable of producing power, but using them at the gate creates problems immediately. They are loud. They burn far more fuel. Their exhaust and suction can be dangerous around workers, vehicles, loose equipment, and anyone standing too close. So engineers began giving aircraft a way to separate ground support from flight power. Instead of asking the main engines to handle every job, the airplane could carry a smaller onboard source for electricity and compressed air. Different aircraft designs placed auxiliary units in different locations depending on available space, structure, airflow, duct routing, heat, and maintenance access. Over time, the tail became a practical place for the system on many airliners. It kept the unit away from the passenger cabin, placed it near useful routing paths for ducts and wires, and allowed hot exhaust to be sent out behind the aircraft, away from doors, ramp workers, fuel servicing, and boarding areas. That little opening has a very direct job. Like any turbine, the APU needs air coming in and hot gases going out. It draws air through an inlet, burns fuel inside a compact engine core, spins a shaft, and drives equipment that produces electrical power. On many airliners, it can also supply bleed air, which is high-pressure air used for systems such as air conditioning and, most importantly, for starting the main engines. The dark opening at the back of the tail is where the APU's exhaust leaves the aircraft after that small turbine has done its work. The jet age made this hidden system far more important. Turbine aircraft brought speed, altitude, and range that older piston airplanes could not match, but their engines also required a more controlled starting process. A large jet engine cannot simply be flicked on like a household appliance. First, it has to be rotated fast enough for air to move properly through the compressor. Then fuel and ignition are introduced at the right moment, while the crew watches temperatures, rotation speeds, pressure, and other indications. If the airflow is not right, the start can go badly. Jet engine starting is not just pressing a button. It is controlled fire inside a carefully managed metal tube. For many operations, ground air carts and external electrical units could still do the job. A thick hose could attach to the aircraft. A power cable could be plugged into a port on the fuselage. The airplane could borrow electricity and air from equipment sitting on the ramp. That worked, but it also meant depending on machinery outside the aircraft. The cart might be late, the equipment might be broken, the airport might not have the right connection available. As airliners flew farther, served more airports, and operated on tighter schedules, carrying an onboard source of power became increasingly valuable. The APU became the airplane's hidden workshop, compact, noisy, tucked away, and ready to provide the first breath of energy. Its location in the tail also created one of the easiest aviation details to misunderstand. From the outside, the opening looks engine-like. Heat can shimmer behind it on the ramp. A sharp little roar may come from the rear of the fuselage even while the big engines under the wings remain completely still. So it is natural for people to assume it must somehow help push the airplane forward. It does not, at least not in any meaningful way. The APU exhaust leaves through the tail because combustion creates hot gas that has to go somewhere. The airplane is not trying to taxi using a tiny hidden jet in the back. Modern APU design is shaped by a mix of safety, heat management, noise, access, airflow, and reliability. The unit sits behind panels that technicians can open for inspection and maintenance. Fire detection and protection systems monitor the area around it. If a serious problem appears, built-in systems can shut it down. Ducts carry pressurized air forward through the aircraft. Electrical lines feed power to cockpit displays, cabin lights, avionics, galleys, pumps, and other essential systems. When passengers board on a hot afternoon and feel cool air already flowing from the overhead vents before the main engines have started, the APU may be the small machine doing the work out of sight. The sequence behind all of this is careful and ordinary at the same time. At the gate, the aircraft may begin by using power supplied by the airport. As departure gets closer, the crew can start the APU. The small turbine spins up, stabilizes, and begins generating electricity. When needed, it also provides bleed air. During engine start, valves open, and that pressurized air is routed to one of the main engines. The compressor begins to turn. Fuel is introduced. Ignition fires. Temperatures rise within limits. The engine accelerates until it can keep running on its own. Then the same process can be repeated for the other engine. Once the main engines are producing their own electrical and pneumatic power, the APU is often shut down. The APU is not limited to sitting on the ramp, though. On some aircraft, under certain procedures and within specific altitude limits, it can also be used in flight. It may provide backup electrical power or support systems if other power sources are lost or unavailable. Most passengers never think about it because they are not meant to. A normal flight feels like one smooth machine doing one continuous job. In reality, a modern airliner is built from layers of support, backups, alternates, and hidden systems waiting quietly behind the scenes. One of the stranger details is that the famous tail hole is only the part people can easily see. The exhaust may be obvious, but the intake can be much harder to spot. It may sit behind a small door that opens only when the APU is running, or it may be placed in a location most passengers never look at closely. Different aircraft also package the system differently. Some tails show a round dark outlet. Others use a different exhaust shape, fairing, or pipe. The basic idea stays the same, even when the outside appearance changes from one aircraft type to another. There is also a quiet surprise in what happens when the APU is not needed. At many modern gates, airplanes can plug into ground power and connect to preconditioned air from the terminal, reducing fuel burn, noise, and exhaust around the airport. In that case, the aircraft may sit calmly with cables and hoses attached, more like a building connected to the city than a machine preparing to fly. But at a remote stand during a fast turnaround, in harsh weather, or when airport equipment is not available, the small turbine in the tail becomes the airplane's own private power station. So the hole in the tail is not a flaw, a decoration, or some mysterious leftover from the design process. It is the visible end of a hidden chain of fuel, air, heat, electricity, pressure, and motion. Before the giant engines roar, before the aircraft pushes back from the gate, before the runway lights line up in front of the nose, a much smaller machine may already be working deep inside the tail. That dark little opening marks the place where an airliner begins waking itself up,